Welcome back to Something Private, a podcast for Southeast Asian women by Southeast Asian women, exploring conversations around health, the self, community, and love. My name is Nicole, and I am your producer and host. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Nicole.
Welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. Yeah.
So it's been, I would say, 5-6 months.
Yeah, I think the last show came out in November.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How have you been since then?
I've been okay. I actually fractured my foot while climbing, as Nicole is well aware. If you watch our season 4 trailer, you might see me and a bit of my walker boot hobbling into the shot. Yeah.
Every day when she comes into the office, she wears one Doc Martens boot.
Yeah, then when you open the shoe cabinet, you'll find one boot. That's all.
So very nice to have you back on the show. For all of you who have just joined us, or if you need a refresher, Kim is the co-host for Something Private, and the reason why we wanted to start this Nick Kim column is because I think we feel like we are two young women going through it.
Navigating the world.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of you out there, and so we kind of want to share or have conversations about what the experience
It's
is
the kind of conversations that you have with your friends that we hope that like we can help to replicate and also like push in the right directions.
So essentially, we will try to be insightful, okay?
Try our best.
That's the essence
We
of it.
have some sources.
We do.
We will have citations.
Yes, we have some inkling of what we're saying. But
Yes.
yeah, essentially that's the premise of it. So I think when thinking about the topics that we wanted to cover for this episode of the Nick Kim column, there was one recurring theme, something that we kept coming back to, and that is subtle forms of sexual harassment that are often overlooked or swept under the rug. So
Yeah, so we were thinking about not just the very, very obvious physical forms of sexual harassment that you may immediately think of, like rape, molestation, like very publicly like obvious things, but rather things that you kind of just like overlook. So things like catcalling, things like, grab uncles being a little too friendly, things like just I think we defined it as like verbal and visual forms of sexual harassment.
And physical.
Verbal, on top of the physical.
Visual. Yeah, I think the key thing is essentially that harassment is things that make you feel uncomfortable. Like anything that makes you as an individual or the person on the receiving end of it feel uncomfortable counts as harassment.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because I think in talking about this or like sharing our experiences with one another, right? It's a topic that also has been in the news quite a bit recently.
Yeah, it's even trending on TikTok.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's this trend that's going on now called the 97% trend.
UN came up with this study that said that 97% of the women in UK have experienced some form of sexual harassment in their lives. And the statistic is wild because 97% means basically everyone. We were joking that the 3% are either oblivious or lying.
Yep.
Yeah. But to be very fair, when we were sharing our own like experiences, we realized that there were so many things that we kind of just accept as part of being a woman.
Yeah, but I think it's difficult also, right? Because like exactly that's why it's called like subtle forms of sexual harassment, because they happen in your day-to-day activities, and like it could happen to you from like a Grab driver. Then if you are in a situation and you're on the way to somewhere, like an important meeting for instance, then you just like, Uncle, can you drop me off here? It's very difficult to navigate that kind of conversation, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult to get out of situations in that weird kind of space. Yeah.
Correct. But then also like that presents itself as a very real threat, because like, I mean, if it goes unchecked, then it could lead to even more severe instances of sexual harassment. And talking about that TikTok trend, right, it's very interesting because I was reading some of the comments. I think it's interesting to hear what the other perspectives were. So some people were saying 97%, like what a big percentage, like show me the statistics, show me how you conducted the study. Essentially like in disbelief that can be that many women.
Questioning the United Nations.
The UN! Like, why? Anyway, so that was one of that. The other was, I think they were and it's a very common comment, right? They were saying
Yeah.
like, what was she wearing? You know, what was the victim doing at that point of time?
Which kind of ties back to another thing that we were talking. I mean, things that we have been doing on our Instagram for like victim blaming and things like that. Very, very easy things to reach out to try and like make logical sense of phenomena that you may not understand.
97% of women, I mean, sorry to harp on that number, but it's such a big number. And granted, it is a statistic that was in the UK, but
it's very telling.
Like, and I feel like it's something that even we
experience
kind of like bonded over, you know? Yeah.
So I think Nicole and I were like, when we first met, one of the first things that we talked about were like, you know, you would talk about like TV shows that you like or like music that you like, and we both like quite a few of the same TV shows. And one of the shows that Nicole and I actually bonded over was Sex Education, with very, very attractive Gillian Anderson, by the way. But okay, that aside, there was one episode that featured one of the main characters getting sexually harassed on a bus.
Yeah.
And then later in the episode, she actually attended detention. And it was one of those scenes where you're in a high school. It's one of those Breakfast Club like scenes where everyone doesn't actually know everyone knows each other from school, but they don't ever talk. Yeah. And the only reason that they bonded in that episode was because they had all experienced some form of sexual harassment before.
Yeah, which is...
It was very
interesting,
real.
But very sad. It's like...
very sad and very real.
Correct. I could totally imagine a scenario where I'm in that exact situation where like I meet a girl and like she tells me about this experience that she's gone through, and I immediately empathize, right? Because I'm like, okay, this is something that I have experienced as well, and I know what it's like to go through that. Yeah. Okay, so I think before we carry on, I just want to kind of lay out the definition of what sexual harassment is, because it is a very grey area. Yeah. So according to the UN, sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual advances, request for sexual favor, verbal or physical conduct or gesture of a sexual nature which might cause offense or humiliation to another. So I think it's very interesting because the term like sexual advances and sexual favor, what is that? Broad, grey, you know, it could be like
it could be anything.
It could be anything. Yep. I think the UN has a really long list of like what constitutes as sexual harassment, and I find it very interesting because one of them, which I think all of us can relate to, is being looked up and down, you know, like a person's eyes like looking you up.
The male gaze.
The male gaze. All of us can attest to it. Yeah.
It's very interesting that we raise the male gaze because you learn from what you see on media and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And from a very young and actually like even the way that you manage interpersonal relationships, you end up taking from the things that you see around you. So I think a very, very it's a very touchy thing because as a young woman you also don't learn how to manage these things when they start happening to you. So I think for me, the experience that I had was more in the workplace. And for you it was more in school, right? Which I think is very, very weird because very, very different, because then like power dynamics come into play, and also like the capacity that you are in as like a peer versus like as a like, young new joiner in a company, for example. Yeah.
On the topic of learning about interpersonal relationships, I think my instance of sexual harassment, I would say, happened to me during a period of time where I was trying to understand, you know, like boy-girl relationships, navigating that kind of dynamic. And growing up, you know, nobody really has like a guidebook on like BGRs. All you do is like read columns, or even to navigate like friend groups, like if you are entering a new social setting. So what happened to me was, and I'm not sure if people can relate, but essentially, I had just entered university and everybody was staying in like a hostel, and it was at the midpoint of like the semester where we all had like a house party. So it was like in a chalet and stuff like that. So basically new friendships were formed, right? And like I had become very close to this one guy from this hostel, and we were like buddies, really like buddies. Like we were like eat together, stuff like that, in a group setting lah, like not really on one-on-one. But what happened was that when we were at the chalet, as a part of like the initiation, I had gotten quite drunk. And so at the point of time, the night moved very fast. Like I think all of the freshies lah, what they call it, right, were getting very drunk, and just a lot of like chaos going on, people playing games. And about maybe 2 hours into the night, this senior, this female senior came up to me and was like, Nicole, you better watch out because this guy has been touching you the whole night, and he's been like kissing you on your cheeks, on your neck, and just like groping you. And because I was drunk, I couldn't remember what was happening. But for some reason, when she told me that, right, I instantly snapped out of it. I was like, oh wait, actually, yeah, like I recall that he has been like unnecessarily touchy with me. I recall that, we've been walking around the whole chalet and he's just been like holding me by my waist, touching like my arm, giving me kisses on my face and everything, basically like molesting me lah. And immediately I was like, okay, I felt very lousy about myself, and I was like, okay, I went to another friend and told him that like I'm very uncomfortable, I want to go home. So I left the chalet. Okay, so it's an incident that happened to me 5 years ago. But what is interesting is that I took about 2 to 3 years to kind of process this whole thing. For a very long time, I kind of just like swept the incident under the rug. I was like, okay, firstly, the first thing is that I had willingly put myself in a situation. Right? I had gone to the party, I had been chummy with this individual, and I had gotten myself drunk. Right? I was like 19. The second thing is I didn't know what to do, because after the incident happened, it turned out that this guy had also molested a bunch of girls at the party, right? And at that point of time, because we were all freshmen, so he was getting advice, and I think word spreads around very fast.
Yeah.
So he was getting advice from some of the seniors in hostel who were telling him, okay, we understand and know your story, but you need to go and apologize to these girls. But once you have done that, we will still come back and accept you. So what he did was that like he called up all the different girls, and there were 7 of us, I still remember. He called all of us up when we were all staying in hostel, and he apologized to everyone. And when it came to me, he told me that I'm the last girl that he wanted to approach because he was afraid at how I would take the news. So essentially what he said was, he apologized and he was very sincere about it. He was like, I'm so sorry like this happened, but I really, 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 really don't remember doing this. And at one time I was very pissed off because like, what do you mean like you don't remember? Like I know I was drunk and at some point of time I lost some memory, but I'm very sure like I know what I was feeling, and it cannot be that 7 other girls.
You cannot have done this to 7 people.
And then
not
say
knowing.
You don't remember. Yeah. So I was very pissed off, and I think I was even more pissed off at the fact that like all the seniors were egging him on. Like they didn't come to the 7 of us. None of the seniors came to the 7 of us and went like, are you guys okay? Nobody asked us if we were okay. It was just the 7 of us having to accept that this was done to us and his apology. And eventually what happened the following couple of years was that he continued to secure his hostel stay because it's by a recommendation basis. And I had to continue seeing him around. I was just feeling very upset because I cannot believe that something like that happened to me and nobody's on my side. And so eventually I kind of like moved out of the hostel and like drifted from everybody there. But I think I experienced like the stages of acceptance. It was at first like denial, like I can't believe this happened to me, I don't recognize it. And then I was like angry. I was like, I want to call this person out on like social media, which I didn't do. And then like slowly accepting that this has happened and like feeling regret, because I think that if somebody had guided me, or if I had known that I could speak out during that period of time, things would have been a lot more different.
First of all, thank you for sharing. I think I understand why you took so long to kind of process it, because I think especially in a school setting, there's so many moving parts. There's so many people who kind of want to keep the status quo. They don't want to disrupt it. They just want to kind of get it back to where it was.
Yeah.
So even if this guy obviously crossed the line, 7 girls is a lot of girls. Even if it was just you, it will already be one more than he should. Even if there were people who weren't agreeing, like weren't really comfortable with it, they don't feel comfortable speaking out because then they are going against the grain.
I think for a very long time I had kind of like swept that incident under the rug, and I really just buried it, in my memory. Like even at the point of time I was dating somebody, and I remember like this is a bit messed up, but he got angry at me for putting myself in a dangerous situation. No, really. No, really.
No
and
way. No.
I can understand where he's coming from also. I mean, in hindsight now, because I did willingly go there. yes, I did willingly take those alcohol shots. Nobody shoved it on my throat. I took it myself. You know what I mean? But I can say that I might have wanted maybe more support from like somebody with a bit more knowledge on this area at that point of
For
time.
sure.
I would say that like my case wasn't that severe. But in hindsight, also now I can, like you were saying, I can understand that as a senior, who's gonna be like, no, like let's bring our pitchforks.
Yeah,
you
let's
know?
kick him out.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. It's a difficult dynamic
Mm.
to navigate. And while I was angry, maybe like 3 years ago, 2 years after I processed it, but really now I kind of like, I really understand like where the challenges and difficulties are. And maybe I would say it's a bit of a twofold thing. I don't know maybe if you agree with me, but it's one, for the person in that situation, the me in the situation, right, to look out for myself a bit better. And two, for like people in my hostel to speak up when they see that something is going wrong. Not even like speak up to be like kepo, like you said just now, like, are you okay? But just to check in.
I mean,
to
you're
keep
really
tabs.
lucky that you had that female senior to
Correct.
that approach you to say, hey Nick, watch out.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So I think, I mean, be thankful for people like that
Mm.
because they did take the step to at
mm,
least say
mm,
something.
mm.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? Because like I think for most of us, we'll either find ourselves in the situation of like 97%, either the victim/survivor or the bystander. So in a situation like this, I would say that, yeah, I'm thankful that somebody came up to me. If not, I would have gone the whole night and then gone home and felt like, wait,
Yep.
something's wrong. Yeah. But yeah.
But actually, when your boyfriend at the time felt uncomfortable and like actually directed his anger at you, now looking at it at our age, do you feel like it's because he felt angry, like he couldn't be there to protect you, or like, you know what I mean? Was he directing his anger at you, at the guy, at you? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's his unprocessed, or like he don't know where to how to navigate what he was feeling at that point of time, right? So I didn't blame him. Actually I really don't blame him at all. I blame nobody lah, it's nobody's fault lah. But it's just,
It's the guy's fault, dude.
it's the guy's fault. It's the guy's fault. But taking myself out of that situation now and looking at it, right? I think these are instances that everybody in like who have gone through like higher education, not even higher education, like just people who go to school might have experience, right? Because the idea of like, I want to fit in, I want to go to this cool party or event, I want to seem like social, I want to be this fun girl that everybody kind of struggles with. And going back to the point I made earlier, like nobody gives you the handbook on like, if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable,
where do you draw the line?
What do I say to them,
Yeah, I think just to add another layer to it, I also experienced some forms of sexual harassment when I was growing up and in university as well. But I think none of them were as physical as yours. The one that I experienced was in the workplace, which I think is a very different dynamic because then there's a lot of power play. There's a lot of, I guess what is similar to what you said about fitting in, but instead of it being like parties and events, you are kind of a young person in a new industry, in a new kind of, you're just starting your career and you don't want to disrupt your boat, because then it kind of labels you as that kind of person where like, oh, she's a prude, or oh, she doesn't really
fit the culture.
Yeah, she doesn't fit the culture, and we're just having fun. There's nothing wrong with it. So for me, in one of the places I worked at, I was actually emceeing an office party. So this was, just a kind of a big event. Like everyone, I think they rented out one of the clubs. Then we were there. It wasn't really like a super late night thing. It was just like a normal, like after office hours kind of party. And then everyone was in costume. Just like one of those fun events. Then I was emceeing and I was giving out lucky draw prizes. So it's just one of those things where you're announcing everyone. And then one of the higher ups was called to come and give out the top 10 prizes. So this was obviously towards the tail end of the night, after everyone had eaten, everyone had gotten quite a few drinks down. Then he had come up and he stood. So there was me and another male co-host. So at first he was just standing next to me. Then he was kind of touchy, but just like an arm or whatever. Then his hand kind of went to my waist, then down to the small of my back, and then he started like whispering into my ear. And at the end of the night, he even gave me a kiss on my cheek. But it was in the kind of position where I'm literally in front of the entire company, on a stage, like speaking into a microphone, and I can't exactly just leave. So I think in instances like this before, I've always just left because I didn't see the point of like, you're not going to remember if you are claiming that you're drunk, or you're not even going to remember if you're going to use this as a thing where like, hey, why do you run off that day? Do you know what I mean? So to me, like whenever I had faced anything like this before, I would just literally like physically leave.
Remove yourself.
Yeah, just physically remove myself. But it was in a position where I could not.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, like I said, I was in front of everybody and also the MC. So I had to kind of just keep my smile on, just keep talking. And then it was very strange because I remember just kind of, I told my boyfriend, then he was just, just keep, like, be careful, He knows that I know I'm doing, so he knew that I was fine. But months later, when I was speaking to, by then it was an ex-colleague about it, who was photographing the event, like, this came up organically, and then he said, oh yeah, I actually saw that he was very touchy with you that night. Then I said, really, I didn't realize that anybody saw it. And then he said, as a photographer, I see everything. And that's when I realized that, hey, actually, other people are very aware that these things happen, but then they also don't feel like they have any power to say anything or stop anything. So, I mean, that colleague the ex-colleague that I was speaking to, was a male. And then he kind of, I mean, I would call him an ally because, he obviously saw it as a negative thing, but then could he have done anything in that setting where he pulls out his camera, he stops taking his photos, and then he just like, hey, what are you doing? Stop. Yeah, like, how can you know what I mean?
Yep.
Especially when it's someone in a higher authority. Yeah, like, what kind of dynamic is there? And like, it kind of just puts you in that position where you can't do anything except like accept it. Yeah.
We're taking a short break. Something Private is a podcast produced under media publisher Our Grandfather's Story. Watch our new episodes every alternate Tuesdays on YouTube and listen to us on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcast every alternate Thursdays. New episodes will be published first on YouTube and we'll be publishing once every 2 weeks this season. We've also just launched our new website, so pay us a visit at somethingprivate.fm if you'd like to share your story with us or work with us. Otherwise, you can send us a message on Instagram at somethingprivatepod or email us at nicole@somethingprivate.fm. We're immensely grateful for all the support you guys have given us, and we really couldn't have come this far without you. If you'd like to keep supporting our work, become our Patreon at patreon.com/somethingprivatepod. That's patreon.com/somethingprivatepod. Now back to the episode. So I think it's interesting because, yeah, you're right. It's a work. I think talking about workplace harassment is a very different issue, right? Because like there are a lot more factors. I wouldn't say a lot more factors, but like it concerns your livelihood, right? Like, are you going to be fired potentially? There are many instances of women getting let go from the workplace because they had.
It's very hard to actually file a proper HR thing, or even when you're asking yourself like, should I even file a HR thing? Like, should I?
Was that something that you?
No, I didn't. Yeah, because to me it was something that, as in, he didn't do. Yeah, exactly, right. Where do you draw the line? I guess it's just like, no, it's not worth it. Yeah. But I know that there are some instances of girls who actually went to HR and then the guy was maybe just forced to make an apology and then that's about it. Like, which, I mean, he should not need HR to tell him that there's an apology to be made. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep. I recently watched a YouTube video. No, but it's very good. It's like this short film platform, and it was about like this woman who had faced subtle forms of workplace harassment and she had brought it up to HR, but because she hadn't gathered any physical evidence and the perpetrator had a very good track record of like being a good employee and stuff like that, excellent worker, the people who were on the committee of like inquiry essentially
Wrote it
shut
off.
her down. Yeah, like wrote off like her complaint, which is interesting because I think that it's difficult to navigate. Like,
Yeah.
how do you firstly gather evidence?
Yeah.
And secondly, what as a victim / survivor, right? I'm not even sure whether you or me, whether we are even clear of what kind of redress that we want from it, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there are a lot of high profile cases of those like really, really big like workplace harassment, like Harvey Weinstein, or like, you know, all those kind of stories where it's very, very clear that these people did something wrong.
Yep.
But when it's all these subtle forms of sexual harassment, you end up just writing it off. You say like, okay, never mind, it's no big deal, I can live with it. I'm okay. And then you end up letting it continue. Yeah.
Let's do a check-in.
Okay.
You and I.
Okay, sure.
I'm curious to know because, and I don't know if nobody has ever asked me this before, but I would like to ask you, and I would like us to have a conversation. How do you feel now, having gone through that situation of like harassment, and what, I guess, are things that you felt like you would have wanted to change maybe in a period of time, and how do you feel about it where you are now as an individual?
I think honestly, it's very hard to say what I can change, because if I were in the situation, I still wouldn't know what to do. If I was in the exact same situation and the exact same thing happened to me, I still can't leave. Yeah. So if you ask me, like, would I have not taken up the MC role? I mean, that's a bit weird also, you know what I mean? Like, I enjoyed the MC. It's like, you can still enjoy the night and have this happen to you. I think those are two separate things. Honestly, I don't know, because it's such a precarious situation. Where I am now is that, you know, I'm glad that I left, but I didn't obviously leave because of this incident. Yeah, it was something that I definitely could live with, and something that I was willing to continue working there despite of. But now that I have changed jobs and, you know, I'm in a new company, I think that fear has completely like gone down. So it's a thing that you don't realize you keep in the back of your mind until you leave. Yeah, which is another thing lah. In a younger workplace environment with everybody of the same age, and no longer here because, you know, you want to like impress your friends or whatever. I think if there were any such instances, then it will be shut down like immediately. Yeah, I have that confidence now.
Do you think you're more equipped to navigate other potential scenarios? I mean, not particularly the one that you went through.
I really think it's difficult because, like I said before, I always leave when I can. So yes, I would say that's still an option if I weren't in such a like specific situation. But every form of sexual harassment is very different. So you don't really find like one. It's not like one solution for all kind of thing. Yeah, you really have to know, like, okay, these are my options and what can I do now, kind of thing.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just like, now that we're on the topic of sexual harassment, right? You really sometimes just repress all these.
There is, you know, when you were talking, I just kept thinking of things that
all the things that happened. No, it's coming out now. I'm like, wait. Oh, was I harassed?
It's true.
I want to share one instance that I feel like maybe the younger people who listen to us can relate to. This is something that happened to me as part of like a guy like kind of chasing me as a girl in secondary school. So I was about like 13, very young, adolescent. Okay. This guy was 4 years my senior. He was 17, and he was my neighbor. We had gone to the same school because, you know, the same like neighborhood, you go to the same school and stuff like that. And yeah, so I was in love with his friend, and to, I guess, like kind of bait me to hang out with him, he would often like invite his friend over to his house and then like invite me to come over to like their room. I never went over. Okay. I never went over, but because I was in contact with this other guy, right? I was texting this guy. So I think he shared my number with this guy who was my neighbor lah. And this guy had eventually, after he got my number, what he would do is that like he would pester me for days on end about meeting up, about hanging out. At some point of time, he was buying gifts, and then at the point of time, I really like don't judge me, I really like Katy Perry. So he told me, he texted me, he was like, I bought the Katy Perry album for you. Can you come and meet me? I would like to give it to you and stuff like that. And then because we are neighbors, right? So there was also once where he had taken the same bus as me and like essentially like stopped me home. So at that point of time, and I wasn't the only one who he had harassed, because I had a group of female friends, and he had, I guess, this other girl in our clique who was quite pretty also lah, and he would tell her like, oh, I bought this like dress, I really want to like pass it to you. And I think at that point of time I knew it was creepy, but I really didn't know what to do.
Yep.
Who would I tell? Can I tell my parents? Can I tell my teachers? Like even my female friends were like, we were all together like, eee, they're disgusting. But
it's very strange because it's just unsolicited gift giving.
Correct.
Yeah, which is just weird.
It bothered. I think until now, I would say like it kind of like it really freaks me out. It's like I was 13 and he was like 17, pushing 20, you know? And yeah, it's just creepy lah. And I think what I did eventually was like I blocked him on all like social media platforms. It's really, to me, it was not flattering at all. I didn't feel like pursued or like I liked the attention. I hated it. It was just like creepy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just thinking about like that boy-girl relationship kind of dynamic, which is one of the things that was on the list of sexual harassment things, right? Like unwanted constant pursuing of an individual even after they have like rejected you.
Like I think when you start speaking to like, you know, whatever gender you're interested in or like person, there's all this like new kind of territory that you're very unused to. You are trying to figure out who you are in a relationship or like who you are as a woman, like, you know, exploring these kind of things for us. Then I remember that I was speaking to a guy and then trying to just to get to know him better. And then he was telling me that, you know, he still he was going through a lot of stuff at that point. And then I was just trying to ask him more questions because I was interested. I mean, but before you like you immediately get interested in someone, then you kind of, you know, ask them questions. Then it got to a point where he literally, like we were texting, and then he literally said, you wanted to get into my head, but I wanted to get into your pants, so it's not gonna work. And then I remember I was quite young, so I was just like, wait, what? Because
what were you?
17? Yeah. Okay, like not super young, but I think still.
He thinks it's a line.
Huh?
He thinks it's a line. He thinks
he thinks it's a line.
Yeah.
He was trying to bait me into, you know how it's like it's like the low key hero complex kind of thing. Like when somebody is troubled, then you kind of want to help them, and after that, he's just like, no.
No, it's disgusting. Continue. Yeah.
Or he's trying. Yeah, it's kind of like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he is trying to just like get me to say like, oh, but I do want to help you, blah, 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 or whatever, you know what I mean? But anyway, long story short, I kind of stopped speaking to him after a while. And then he started talking to me again after I had gotten, at that point, together with another guy. And then he actually texted me to say, oh, you got together with this guy. I thought that if you were going to get together with anyone, it would have been me. Yeah, which is very, very strange because who are you? And like, what kind of right do you have to say that?
Yeah.
Do you own me?
Yeah.
No?
Eee.
It's very, very strange. And then I think similarly to what you mentioned earlier, my boyfriend at the time got very angry at me to ask me, why would you even reply him if he said this to you before? Yeah. And then at that point, I was thinking like, but why would he say this? Blah, blah, blah. Then I realized that the only reason why I replied is that because he actually got a rise from me, which I allowed. You know what I mean? You are enabling this person to kind of get a reaction from you.
Yeah.
And that's what they want.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just very strange. Like all these instances of people who think that they can take advantage of you in different ways.
Yeah. I think it's a nice
segue
to our next point on like allyship. And like I mentioned just now, if you are not the victim/survivor, men or women, you are definitely in a position of being a bystander.
Yeah,
right?
we also wanted to say that sexual harassment can happen to anyone, man or woman. Yeah, which I think we want to be very clear about because like in the news, like you always see a large percentage of the same gender, but just because it isn't reported doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the cases of harassment that happen to men often go unreported because it's, I would say, even more stigmatized for men to come forward with their stories and potentially even like emasculating or could affect them in more ways than, I would say, women now. I think that a lot of women are coming forward more of their stories.
Even 50 years ago, it was so difficult for women to come out. And if you think about like masculinity and how even that is kind of being explored nowadays, it will be a while more before men feel comfortable to share as well. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think the thing that we realize is also that anyone can victim blame. Even as women or like fellow victims, we can also say like, hey, what were you doing in that situation? Like, why would you put yourself in that situation? But it's important to first stop and listen, because I think every situation is different, and it's important to remember that, like, even in the situations that we shared today, it's very hard to say what you could have done in the situation.
Correct. But I would say, adding on to that, like, eventually after processing what I had gone through and speaking about it to friends really made me feel a lot better, and I think that helped me in deciding that, like, it's not a situation that I want to pursue. I can just, honestly, I can live with it. It's like fine, you know. But and I can very comfortably talk about it even like now. So I think you're right, like 100%. Listening is definitely the first step. I would add on to say listening and not rushing to kind of give like your inputs to be like, but this, but that.
I think in many situations you will be like, but wait, can I try and understand?
Correct.
If it was in this situation, what we would have done.
Correct.
But then the thing is that that's not the situation we're in.
Correct. We don't want to talk about how to remedy.
Or like, what if.
Correct. It's more
already happened.
It already happened. We want to talk about it. Let us talk, you know? Which leads me to the second point. I think about like lived experiences. The reason why it's called lived experiences, right? If there's a person telling you about their lived experience, I think you have, firstly, you're in a place of privilege really, that they allow you to come into their space. The second thing is really to not treat it like a intellectual exercise, you know, especially if somebody went through something emotional, then you're there like trying to debate on like the factors that might have been, what the intentions were.
I mean, the clothing example is a very obvious one, right? Because I think that's the one that comes out the most often. Like, oh, is it the things that you were wearing? Or is it like the place that you were at, the time of day, these kinds of things. But the whole point is that doesn't matter anymore because it already happened. And there are so many people who, I mean, there's so many studies to show that those factors are not like the point. Because in the case of Sarah Everett, it happened in a busy street in London, 9 p.m. by a policeman. The perpetrator is a man who was supposed to keep us safe. Like, what kind of nonsense?
Damn wretched. And I think it's very interesting because from that case, one I would think is a good thing that came up from it was, besides everybody talking about sexual harassment, like women coming forward with their cases a bit more, it was very interesting because there was actually like initiatives by men on social media also coming forward to be like, hey, like, ladies, let's have an honest conversation. How can I be a better ally to you? How can I help you feel safe in a situation where like it's potentially unsafe? So I saw this thread about this guy who was like, if let's say I'm walking behind a woman at night, how can I let you know that I'm not a creep? And it was very wholesome because like the women were like, this is what you can do. Either you pause and you wait for me to finish walking first, or you can pretend like you're talking on the phone with somebody, be like, hey, I'm coming by your house and whatever. I'm like basically giving her cues that I'm a normal person, right? And the guys were listening. They were like, thank you for letting me know. I'm more aware now of what to do. And I think that this is excellent like allyship, just listening, having open, honest conversation. If you ask us what you could do, I'm very sure that you and I would be like,
I think we actually had this conversation yesterday, like very, very candidly with one of our colleagues, and he was saying that he would like pull out his keys to show that, like, you know, make noise to show that, hey,
how far
I'm here,
you
or
are.
like, how far you are, or just show like, oh yeah, I live here too, or like, you know, that kind of thing, or just kind of walk either like you kind of slow down your pace so that it doesn't sound like your footsteps don't sound threatening. These kinds of things, like just very subtle cues to make you know that okay, you're not alone, but also like I'm not coming after you. Yeah.
I think the last point on, adding on to that, this is a difficult one for everybody. I think one of the biggest things that we all have to do as society, right, is really to have an honest conversation with ourselves, to sit and reflect on the ways that we might have been perpetuating some of these kinds of sexist remarks, thoughts, and if we had potentially maybe done anything that could verge on like harassment. I think that's not an easy conversation to have, but if you are tuning in, even if you are a woman, I think it doesn't matter your gender.
Whether you allowed it to happen or you participated in the act.
Correct. So I think to round up today's conversation, I think we talked about a lot of very interesting things, but I think I just want to take a moment and hold space for each other and all the women, all the men go through like cases of like harassment. Your experiences are valid and you are hurt. And I think my conclusion is really, if you are a person of if you are a victim or survivor, know that it's important to keep having conversations like these with yourself, with the people around you that you love. Know that you can remove yourself from the situation that you feel uncomfortable in. You have the power to do that. And for bystanders, I think that you have a part to play in making sure that the people around you are safe. And keeping like your environment harassment free one. I think everybody has a duty and part to play.
Yeah. And I think if you are like Nicole or I and you find yourself ever in a situation where you have no idea what to do, or you are just in that position where you have to accept what's happening, just know that these conversations can always be had with the people that you trust, with the people around you, and it's not your fault because it can happen to anyone.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Nicole. Hugs.
Thank you.